we'll be giving the floor now to Kat Scott, who will be helping us unpack, things that have to do with what are the competencies you need to secure teaching jobs and excel in UK classrooms. And she heads education and research at the College of Teaching, Chartered College of Teaching in the UK. I leave Kat to lead us all the way. Kat, you're welcome, and thank you for finding time to join us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and very much to echo Catherine's excellent presentation. It's a real privilege to have the chance to speak to you all and to see so many teachers here this evening interested in working in the United Kingdom, interested in developing themselves and potentially contributing to our education system. I was a secondary school English teacher, and as Peter has said, I now lead research and education training at the Chartered College of Teaching. I think thinking about what it is that schools look for in teachers when they're recruiting, I think it's important to say to begin with that we have, as I'm sure there is in Nigeria, a lot of different kinds of schools, and those different schools will be looking for very different things. Of course, there are primary schools, there are secondary schools, there are nursery settings, but also we would have some schools which are state funded, some schools which are fee paying, and schools which have different priorities and different interests. There will also be different things that schools are looking for in terms of subject areas. So, for example, we have a real shortage of secondary science teachers, and particularly secondary physics teachers. And so there'll be many schools that will be looking for physics teachers, for example. As Catherine also said in her presentation, we have a very diverse student body within our schools, and that means that schools really see the value of the diversity and richness of perspective that can be brought from teachers who have trained or taught overseas. But to be a bit more specific, there are certain things, of course, that our schools will be looking for when they're looking to recruit teachers. And I'm going to talk about these in terms of the particular areas that would be covered in teacher training in England and in induction for new teachers in England, because this is the kind of areas that teachers would be assessed against, and are the sorts of areas that people will be looking for in terms of experienced teachers as well. The first one of those is very much about having high expectations of pupils and of all pupils, that actually all pupils can achieve. And you would be teaching children with very different backgrounds, very different educational attainment, but all of those pupils you would be expected to have high expectations for and feel that they can all make progress. That's something that is very much at the heart of schools here, trying to help everybody to achieve as highly as possible. The second area is that schools will be looking for people who really understand how pupils learn. And I mean that in a very sort of scientific way. Catherine talked about engagement with research evidence and understanding that, and something that has become very popular in England in the last few years has been learning from things like cognitive science and research around how the brain works, neuroscience, to help us understand how pupils learn, how memory works, how we can help pupils to learn most effectively. That's certainly something that schools will be keen to see, that many schools are working on. There are some brilliant books that you can read. There are some brilliant courses that you can do online to help you to support with these. The next area that is covered within teacher training and early career induction is around subject knowledge and curriculum knowledge. And this, I think, is crucially important, of course, particularly for secondary school teachers who are teaching a specific subject, but also for primary school teachers. And that is that schools will want to see that you have really excellent subject knowledge, that your knowledge, if you are a maths teacher, that you have very strong maths knowledge. If you are a science teacher, again, that your science knowledge is very strong. So they would be looking at your degree that you studied, but also understanding your knowledge of that subject and how to teach and support others best. we heard just now about the challenges and importance of teaching maths. This is true for all subjects, that having a real love for your subject and a real passion for teaching others is really, really important. There is also an interest in curriculum design, although it will vary a lot from school to school, how much you are expected to plan your own lessons and your own sequences of lessons, or how much you are given a set sort of plan and curriculum to teach. So there will be variation there, but an understanding of what good curriculum looks like and good curriculum design looks like is part of what schools would be looking for. Linked to that is very much the ability to plan and teach well-structured lessons. So again, this is the ability to, if you know what you want to teach to your pupils, how do you plan a lesson that means that they end that lesson knowing what you want them to? We heard earlier from the student of the real importance here of actually going into quite a lot of depth, and how rather than covering lots of different subjects and lots of different topics for very short lessons, we do tend to focus on spending quite a period of time, maybe a few weeks, focusing on a topic in depth. And so planning lessons over time that really develop students' learning is really important. The next area we've also heard mention of, which is about adaptive teaching, which is a sort of new term that's used by the government to describe supporting pupils and adapting our teaching to support pupils who may have different needs. That would include students with special educational needs. We do have some schools which are specifically schools for pupils with certain special educational needs. They're called special schools. But also many schools will, well, most schools will have quite a large number of students with different special educational needs. They might have dyslexia, autism, but a whole range of other needs as well that you would be supporting in your classroom. And being able to adapt your teaching to make sure that all of those pupils are able to access the learning and be supported and make progress is really important. Another side of that links to the diversity in the classroom that I mentioned. You would be likely to be teaching pupils who might have English as a second language or an additional language, who don't speak English at home. So again, adapting your teaching to make sure that those pupils are able to make progress along with their peers will be really, really important. We heard also from the sixth form student about the way in which questions and assessment are used, and that there are lots of assessments which are designed not to judge students, but to help the teacher make better decisions about what they teach next, to help the teacher know where the student's at. We talk about this formative assessment as being really crucial, and it's something that schools will absolutely be wanting to see. Your ability to use assessment, to use questioning and other techniques in the classroom to understand what your pupils know, to understand what you need to teach them next, to pick up on misconceptions and to help and support and develop them. The next point also was touched on with an earlier question, which is the question of managing behaviour and setting a strong culture in the classroom. There is no doubt that there are pupils within our schools who will display challenging behaviour, and being able to understand how to respond to that, being able to set and build routines in a classroom, to have high expectations of behaviour, to help students to follow the school's policies and to understand the culture that is expected, will be part of what schools will be looking for. And finally, a very broad area that is within this framework is the expectation of professional behaviours. And that doesn't just mean acting professionally, although of course schools would want to see that, but there is also a really strong commitment to teachers wanting to undertake lifelong learning, to teachers wanting to engage with research, to teachers wanting to collaborate with and share with and learn from their colleagues. And that's something that schools will want to see that you are committed to. And that area really is what my organisation is all about. It's about supporting teachers to continue learning throughout their career. It's about supporting teachers to network like you are through the network that you're part of tonight, to learn from your colleagues. and to help you to use research to make decisions in your practice. So this really is the areas that are a focus for our schools. They're a focus for teachers going through training and teachers going through early career induction. But they are also linked to the teacher standards that we would expect to see of teachers. So hopefully, Peter, that gives a bit of an oversight of some of the things that schools would want to see. Of course, there are other areas as well that we've already picked up technology this evening, that technology is widely used in the classroom in England for setting homework, but also with using things like whiteboards in the classroom, of course. So confidence with using technology will be important, and good written and spoken English, because there's a real focus at the moment, especially after the pandemic, on supporting pupils with their speaking, with their oracy, with their confidence in talking, where perhaps during the pandemic they've had less opportunity to talk to other children. And so teachers having the confidence to speak clearly with the children, and also to be able to write reports for parents, will be something that schools will look for. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kat, for the very detailed help you have provided us here. So those of us who are aspiring to come into the UK to teach, you are giving us tips which we'll have to reflect on, and in the areas where we are lagging, we have to work on them, because I know interviews will come. The process of getting people into the UK classroom definitely is rigorous, and you have emphasized the need for us to learn how to use modern technology, because a lot of the work teachers do in the UK now is technology based. And I heard you emphasize the importance of believing that every child can achieve. Can you take about 30 seconds to unpack that for us? That is a bit challenging for the average teacher in Nigeria to understand. I heard Mayoress at the beginning of this evening's meeting emphasize that too. Mayoress was a student here, and she complained about the fact that in a typical classroom, the average teacher has a favorite student who does well all the time, beats everybody in the class, and that child becomes a reference point, and every other child is presented as dull. What do you mean by that? Is that a possibility that every child can achieve?
Yes, I think where this particularly comes from in England is that our student data would show that, for example, pupils from more advantaged backgrounds, so pupils who have parents who are in a better financial situation, for example, will typically do better, will get better results than pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds. So those who have lower income in their families, for example. And the problem can be that there's lots of reasons for this, but there is a concern that sometimes we then begin to expect that, and we begin to say, oh, well, that pupil, they have a very difficult circumstance at home, so they won't get such good results. And sometimes we see from research that actually our expectations affect how well a child will do. So if we say, oh, well, of course that child won't be able to do as well because they don't have the support, or they whatever reason, we almost lead to them doing not as well. And if we say to them, yes, you have difficult circumstances, yes, you find this challenging, but you can still achieve, and we still expect them to do well. And of course, different pupils will get different grades, and that's okay. But we should always expect that all pupils can learn, and we should never sort of say, oh, well, that pupil won't do as well, or some pupils are just not good at maths. There is this expectation that we should expect all children to do the best they can, and we must have these high expectations that children can surprise us. Children are amazing, can learn and achieve amazing things, and we should want that for all of our children.
Okay, great. How do you emphasize, the place of research in running a modern and effective classroom? Can you throw more light on that? The average teacher doesn't have a PhD, and so most people think that research is meant for those who have gone to university to learn how to become lecturers. How come it's becoming important for teachers to pay attention to research and reflections? How relevant is that to the work that teachers do in classrooms?
Yeah, so I'll give a very specific example because the reason there has been so much interest in this is that for a long time, teaching was maybe more instinct or guesswork than research. And when I studied to become a teacher, for example, there was a big focus on the idea of learning styles. I don't know if this is something which also is popular in Nigeria, but this is the idea that some children learn better reading, some children learn better watching a video, some children learn better by hearing something, some children need to touch and model something. And this was very popular in English teacher training maybe 20 years ago. And you would be expected as a teacher to plan different versions of your lessons that would work for all these different children. And this created a huge amount of work for teachers because you had to plan 3-4 versions of your lesson. You had to write on your lesson plan. This is the activity I've got for my kinesthetic learners. Here's the one for my visual learners. And it turns out that there is no research at all to back up this idea, that actually when they've researched this, it makes no difference. Of course, some children like to read, some like to listen, but they don't learn better because you present stuff in the way that they prefer. Of course, some subjects and some topics are best taught in different ways, but there is no benefit to you designing 4 different versions of an activity for your class. So this is an example of where something that is not research-based has been expected in our classrooms, and teachers have spent a long time wasting time when they could be doing better things. And this is where this interest in research has come in, and trying to say, what do we know actually works well in the classroom? What do we know makes a difference? So the government have brought in new training frameworks for new teachers, but also for teachers who have been teaching for some time, which really draw on what the research says and helps teachers to understand what best practice is. And your point is very important. This doesn't mean that all teachers need to have PhDs or that all teachers need to read research papers, because we know that teachers are very, very busy. But this is what organizations like the Chartered College of Teaching do. We produce short articles based on research, which allow you to see what research says about effective practice in the classroom and effective teaching without having to read lots of research papers. But this idea that research evidence should be part of teaching is very strong now in England.
Okay, what about reflections? I hear that a lot from you and from several other, teachers and teacher trainers, especially in most parts of Europe. It's a very popular idea in Finland, where I just returned from. Can you tell us why is it important that teachers engage in reflections on a daily basis?
This builds into the idea of being a lifelong learner, that it's important that we don't just teach our lessons and then carry on and teach our next lesson and our next lesson and our next lesson, but that actually we reflect on ourselves, we reflect on what is working, we reflect on our own development, and that we're constantly looking to be better. A very popular education expert in England, Dylan William, talks about the idea that all teachers should want to get better, not because they're not good enough, but that actually because we can always improve. And I think this is such an important idea, that even the very best teachers, there are things that they can improve upon. And so when we seek to build reflection into our practice, and when we seek to share as well with our colleagues, this is how we can seek to keep improving ourselves.
Oh, great. Now, in Nigeria, we have a bit of a challenge as it concerns teacher development. It's a 50-50 affair. About 50% of our schools are in the hands of government, while the other 50% of schools, you find in the hand of private school operators. Some of them even see school as a regular business. They have to make profit. And so they are very afraid of investing in developing teachers, because the understanding is that if you give teachers the kind of training that will make them more valuable, they will leave. And you will not have them long enough to recoup the cost of training them. And then on the part of the individual teacher, many of them are actually not investing in themselves. It's a very problematic area at the moment. So do you have any advice for us? Does it really make sense continue to spend money to remain in a learning environment?
Yes, I think this is always a challenge, of course, that you worry that if you have really great teachers that you help to develop, then they will be able to move on. But I think the bigger risk sometimes is that you don't have great teachers and they stay because you want always to have the best teachers. And if you don't help to develop your teachers and you constantly have teachers who are not so good, that's not a good thing either. In England, the government has invested a huge amount in supporting teacher development. So all schools that are state funded would have access to free training, the training programs that they can put teachers on. They're called national professional qualifications. They may not continue always to be free, but currently they are funded by the government for teachers to access, which is really, really important. And so schools are being really encouraged and expected to provide and support teachers to develop themselves. And actually, the research shows that having really good subject-specific professional development in particular can help to keep teachers within the school that they work in, but also within the teaching profession. And where teachers don't get opportunities to train and develop, they will tend to leave the school, and they will tend to leave even teaching as a profession. So I think we see almost the opposite, we recognize that we must be giving our teachers development if we want to keep them.
Great. And talking about Chartered College of Teaching, is a UK institution. Can you confirm, is it possible for Nigerian teachers to join you even before they leave Nigeria to come over to the United Kingdom? Are there arrangements that make it possible for teachers in foreign countries to become members of the Chartered College of Marketing? And what's the process of getting there, if that's a possibility?
Yes, it absolutely is. So we offer a range of different memberships, but one of those is our international affiliate membership, which costs just less than £60 per year. And that is available to anyone who is employed as a teacher overseas, and includes print copies of our journal sent 3 times a year, as well as access to all of our resources. And we have various courses that you can also do, some of which are free and some of which you pay for online. But we also have a range of free resources on our website. So we absolutely are here to support people, teachers all around the world. If you come to England, of course, you can then join us as a member. If you are not yet a qualified teacher and you went to somewhere like the University of Reading to train, you can join us free of charge as a student teacher. And once you then qualify, you can join us as a full member. So we have options and resources for all teachers all around the world.
Oh, great. And so what it means is that I can interact with you further on that and get maybe link to your website and share it with our community, so that those who are interested in joining you even before they leave Nigeria can use some of your resources, and of course the privilege of being members of Chartered College of Marketing to begin to prepare for the obvious interviews that we'll have to go through to become to get accepted to become teachers in UK classrooms. Does that sound like something we should be able to do?
Of course.
Sharing the link with them.
Of course, yes.
Okay. All right. So let's see if there's a question I haven't been able to ask that somebody in the house, the people who have invited to join us this evening, may want to throw up. So if there's anyone, very quickly, just before Kat moves on to something else, Kat has raised a number of issues, things that have to do with believe that every child matters and can achieve. Talked about cognitive science, neuroscience these days. That's very important for every child, every teacher to begin to think about. And then having deep, subject knowledge, love for the subject, having an understanding of how to plan curriculum, do lesson planning, not the way we do it in Nigeria, but the way that accommodates the peculiar needs of the children who will be in the classrooms you will meet. And I also paid special attention when she was talking about the need to adapt teaching to meet the needs of different kinds of children you have in the class. And so that they have learning disabilities does not mean that they will not be able to learn. It's just that we have to find more appropriate ways of dealing with them. All right. So if there's any hand we can see, you use the reaction button to raise your hand, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask the question. All right. I can see Ademisoye. IT person, can you permit Ademisoye to speak? After that, we'll go to Deborah. So please go straight to the point. I know our resource persons have done an excellent job, so don't waste time talking about how good they are. We know they are good, that's why we brought them. So ask your question.
Thank you, sir, Doctor, and our guest. My name is Ademisoye Adeleye Sunday. My question is the lesson plan. The lesson plan. I would love to see how the people there write their lesson plan. I know it will be different from our own here in Africa, especially in Nigeria. I will appreciate it if I can see the sample to practice with. Thank you, sir, Doctor.
That's interesting. So, Kat, is that a possibility? Is it possible to see a live document, that can be called a lesson plan?
Oh, it's a really good question. I don't have any, but if you look on maybe things like Twitter or Facebook, or there are some books that are quite good. So I'm trying to remember exactly what it's called. There is a book by someone called Ross Morrison McGill, who I think it's called something like the 5-minute lesson plan, or maybe Mark, Plan, Teach. And in his books, he does show some examples of how to do very quick lesson plans, because exactly as you say, there are very different plans, but also different schools will have some different expectations. Some schools would say you don't need to have a written detailed plan at all, but when you train, so actually a great person to ask for this would be Catherine, who obviously you have her contact details, Peter. She might be able to share the form that they recommend and that they maybe use as a template within the university, which is probably quite flexible for the different schools that they will work with. So she might be able to share an example, which would be really helpful, I think, and would just include a little bit of information about the class, but often the activities that you might have planned and the length of the class. So yeah, Catherine would be a great person to ask for that.
Excellent. So thank you for the recommendation. So I'll get back to Catherine and ask her to help us with probably samples of lesson plans that apply to different schools. I'm also happy to hear you emphasize the possibility that there may be differences in what different schools are emphasizing. In Nigeria, it's not exactly so. But, the government imposes one way of doing it and everybody has to comply, which is very problematic. And we think that it's very laborious. Teachers waste so much time writing lesson plan, which they get into the classroom and discover that by the time they finish doing the job, giving children notes to copy, they don't have much time to interact with the children to get them to understand the content, which is what we have had both, Ayodele and the mayoress complain this evening about the teachers not spending time to get them to see how what they're talking about relates to the real world. So thank you for that recommendation. We're going to, so we go to Deborah Amadibe. If you're there, can we hear you?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Deborah Amadibe and I'm calling from Nigeria. Doctor, I would really appreciate if the resource person can help us with links for UK schools one can actually apply from Nigeria. Thank you. Links for UK.
Yeah, I get your question. That is for Nigerians who want to learn how to teach in the UK, but may not want to practically leave the shores of Nigeria to go into the UK to go, through, teacher training. Yes, that's a possibility. There are about 6 schools I know that are into the IQTS, International, Qualified Teacher Status Programs. And so we can make contact with those ones and share the links with you. But Kat, if you have an idea that is in addition to what I have said, maybe you want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, there will be different ways. You mentioned obviously IQTS, where you can study for qualified teacher status abroad. There's the option to go and study your teacher training in England. Catherine also talked about assessment only, which previously would be the route for a qualified teacher from Nigeria to then have qualified teacher status in England. But as you know, Peter, the government announced a few months ago that that Nigeria, and along with another number of other countries, will become countries where if you have a teaching qualification in Nigeria, that will be much easier to have that recognized to get qualified teacher status in England. They haven't explained the whole process yet, but there are options there. In terms of looking for schools and things like that as well, there are lots of places that schools will advertise. TES magazine is one of them. TES, it's a website, and also the government in England host the teacher vacancy site, so that will be a place that you could look for jobs. But obviously, alongside all of these things will be the requirements to have the visas and rights to work in England as well, which is not an area that I know a great deal about, but I'm sure, Peter, that you can support your colleagues with.
Yeah, that's fine. So Deborah, that's not something to worry about. We will share links on our platforms, the Facebook platform, as well as on the platform for those who have signed up, specifically to be able to get into the United Kingdom to go and teach. So in the coming weeks, we'll be dwelling on how you prepare for interviews, and then show you where the websites that you can get the jobs are, and also, help you with ideas on how to acquire these competencies that, Kat has discussed with us, this evening. So we take just 2 more questions and we let Kat go so that we don't keep her here for too long. All right, Olubukola Abolaji, quickly. Olubukola Abolaji.
Good evening, Doctor.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to quickly clarify. I've actually, gone through the test sites, and I've gotten some school. I've interacting with them already. But two questions I want to find out. There is this service I was told that I have to go through, whether myself, that's a bearing service check, DBS, which of course, Catherine also talked about. Is it okay if I'm given the opportunity, if I get police character check from Nigeria, would that be okay? Or is it compulsory that I have to get there before that will be, established? That's the first question I want to ask. The second question has to do with the issue of money.
Let's answer that first question so we don't forget.
Okay.
We are going to have another interaction where we talk about the specific documents and how to get those things sorted out. So this evening is not going to solve all the problems and provide all the answers. What we have got this evening is the basics, which will now get you preparing. It's not, in Nigeria, we're so much into, credentials, documents. We think that once we get all the documents, the jobs are there. That's not how it works in the United Kingdom. They are more interested in their competencies. Have you got them? And 2, they will check you for, look at your criminal record. If you have any criminal record, we'll give you ideas and how that is going to work out. And then we'll link you with Catherine. Catherine, of course, I'm a product of University of Reading. So getting University of Reading to assist us in all of this will not be a problem. University of Reading will actually be joining us in Lagos next week because as a result of the work I have done over the years in the global education space, the United Kingdom is giving me special recognition on Saturday of next week, and they have invited the university that gave me the platform to learn these things to come and witness the recognition at Eco Hotel. So they will be here, and those of you who are happy to go the extra mile, make some sacrifices, we might be able to give you an opportunity to meet them physically when they come in next week. So we'll be able to attend to that. So finally, let's talk to Kadri Nuruddin.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the information you gave. My question is, what is the methodology used in teaching in primary schools? The methodology used in teaching in primary schools.
The methodology as a pedagogical approach, yeah?
Methodology.
It's a really good question, and it's so interesting to hear that perhaps in Nigeria there is more sort of consistency and expectation of things being the same across multiple schools. In England, it would vary a lot depending on the school that you work in. There is so some schools would take more of an approach where pupils might be sitting in rows and listening to a teacher. Some pupils would maybe do more, some schools would do more group work. There's a real variance. One thing that I would say that is a real focus of the government is on the use of phonics in teaching to read. So that is something that if you were going to work in a primary school, regardless of which primary school you went to work in, they would expect you to have a really good knowledge of phonics, systematic synthetic phonics as a method of teaching reading, because that is now required for all schools, all pupils and all teachers teaching in primary schools. So that would be the one to make sure that you feel confident about. Okay, so thanks. Catherine, if you don't mind, give us just 1 more minute. That can we listen to Okudele Nke Onadi? Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening to the resource person.
Yeah, just go straight because we're running out of time.
If I'm to have the opportunity of having the assessment only QTS, can I as well do it in the UK, or must it be done in Nigeria? Yeah, and what's the duration? How long does it take? Thank you.
So what I would say is that if you already have a Nigerian teaching qualification, you probably would not need to do assessment only now. So currently that is something you would have to do. But from I think, I don't know if it's next month or certainly soon this year, you would be able to have your Nigerian teaching qualification recognised by the UK government. So you wouldn't need to do an assessment to get qualified teacher status in England in the same way. So I would say that it is worth finding out about that and perhaps waiting for that. The assessment only, you would do it with a UK university normally, but they run them in different ways. So University of Reading is a good example of that. And how long it takes depends a bit on your teaching experience already, but I think it's usually several months at least. But again, the University of Reading could provide advice on that.
All right, so if you're able to manage your time well, and that's talking about Sheung and Angola now, 1 sentence, you ask your question, and then we can take that and end the session. Yes, Oluwa Sheung or Lauren Jr.
Okay, hello, good evening.
Hello. I can hear you. Go
okay,
ahead.
Thank you, everyone. I was going to ask, I'm a primary school teacher, and I teach etiquette. Okay, so while I was listening, I heard that jobs are more available for those in the sciences, and I'm not in the sciences at all. So what can one apply for? I teach etiquette and I do phonics with schools.
Okay, before I bring Kat in there, can we find out, have you trained as a teacher? Do you, for example, have a Bachelor of Education?
Yes, I have my PGD in education, sir.
What did you do in your undergraduate program?
Oh, I studied History and International Relations.
Okay, yeah. So definitely there has to be a place for you in the school system in the UK. And Kat, you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, it would probably be in the kind of area of the humanities, the social sciences. So there are things like sociology, for example, that some schools would teach. Being honest, there are less jobs for those kinds of roles than perhaps for science teachers. there are all different jobs for all different kinds of subjects, of course, and there are areas which would have shortages and would be interested to recruit. But just the national picture is that we have more of a shortage of teachers in certain subject areas, which is typically science, maths, computer science, than we do, for example, in the humanities. We also have a shortage for things like languages, often modern foreign languages teachers. And in some places as well, also English teachers. So there are definitely job opportunities, but it is quite varied by subject how much of a shortage of teachers there are, and therefore how many jobs are advertised for different subjects.
All right, that's it. That is very clear. You did make that point before, and you have emphasized it again. Those who come from STEM seem to be obviously at advantage because there is a significant shortage of teachers, in those areas. But again, those are not the only areas where we can find job opportunities. It's just that there are more job opportunities in those areas. And so if you are going to compete in non-STEM areas, you must be very good. And that's why, going forward, we'll be helping you with ideas on how to prepare adequately for the selection process so that you can ace it and be truly competitive. So the last question for this evening is coming from Agbola Abimbola.
Can you hear me, sir? Good evening, sir.
We can hear you. Go speak.
All right, sir. My question is this: that what is the best teaching method to use for both the slow learners and the fast learner at the same time to carry them along while teaching in the class? Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we have heard you. Well, that's a tricky question to ask. So Kat, you do magic there for us.
No, it's a really big question, and I think actually what you described there is exactly what makes an expert teacher, is somebody who is able to do that, who can adapt their explanations to mean that that everyone can understand them, but also can stretch and challenge the people who learn quickly. So sometimes this is about, I would say a big part of this is about being really good at questioning. So being able to pick the right, clear questions to ask to support your learners who are struggling more, but also being able to ask big open questions that challenge and stretch and push on your learners who are learning really quickly. But I think, yeah, working with those two different groups together is at the heart of being an absolute expert teacher, and good luck.
Yeah, I know where the resources are available, and in many schools in England, I have seen that, as while I was doing my doctoral program, that in some schools you find, specialists who are employed and posted to those places to take care of people with special needs, like psychologists, counselors who take care of those ones, while teachers concentrate on the areas where they have strength. In Finland, where I was in recently, is a similar arrangement they have. So the teachers who run the classrooms don't do everything. So they employ psychologists and special education teachers to take responsibility for some of the kind of issues you are raising in terms of people you describe as those who don't move as fast as the rest of members of the class in terms of pace of learning. So so your question is there because you are operating in a very under-resourced education system, which is the Nigeria's case. But moving forward, we will be running campaign to ensure that the next government starting May 29 will definitely have to recognize that the work we do is a very important work, and they need to put more resources into it, and then train teachers and get more specialists to work with us in the classroom so that we'll be able to look after the interests of every kind of student in our classrooms. I think that would be an addition to what Kat has said. Kat, have I made sense there? Are there specialists in the UK school system who work with the regular teachers?
There are, but actually we would have the same. Actually, it's a really interesting one to talk about research, and I won't go into it now, but that actually when we talked earlier about having high expectations, some schools would separate classes depending on the pupil's ability or attainment. So you might have your top set, your fast set, and your slower set. But this sometimes, research suggests, means that the lower sets don't do as well as they would if everyone was mixed together. So there's some real challenges. It can be really hard to teach. And we do have, you would have teaching assistants generally to support just with pupils with very specific special educational needs, but you might still, in a class with no teaching assistant, have quite a big range of pupil knowledge. So it's a challenge for sure, but one that I know that the teachers here are all very much prepared to face.
Yeah, talking about teaching assistants, I see some information on your website talking about how you are recognizing how important they are in the school system, and you're trying to give them some recognition by way of making them, I think, associate members of the college. How does that? What really do you have in mind? What are you trying to do for them, and why is that important?
Really, we are just providing a way for them to join us, to feel that they are a valued part of the teaching profession, and providing resources and support and training for them alongside teachers, because we see what a really crucial role they play within the education system.
All right. Thank you very much. That's where we will end it. I can still see so many hands trying to engage Kat. Kat, what do you think?
You're very welcome to email, or to put, if you want to move on and put questions in the chat, I can stay and answer any questions in the chat, if that's helpful for those who've not had a chance to ask their question. Excellent.
So what we'll do is we have Kat's contact, and we are friends of the Chartered College of Teaching in the UK. You don't have to get there before you start benefiting from the resources they make available for you to learn how to become a competent teacher in the UK environment. And so we are going to give you that access by way of sharing the links to their website. And of course, if it becomes necessary, we'll connect you to Kat and other members of her team. We'll do the same thing for University of Reading and several other universities around, within the UK, even going beyond England, so that if you need to get things that are very unique, we'll definitely be able to press some buttons and get people who are specialists in those areas to come in and help you to do that. So on that note, Kat, I want to say we very much appreciate the time you have devoted to interacting with us this evening, and look forward to hearing from us in terms of more inquiries and asking you to accommodate us in terms of joining the College of Teaching, and so that we can start learning and developing the competencies we need to be able to make successful applications to teach in UK schools.